So, as usual, about React data flow. Usually, working with React, we might encounter the term unidirectional data flow. So what does it mean? Unidirectional data flow isn't a concept unique to React, but as a JavaScript developer, this might be the first time you've heard it. So in general, this concept means that data has one and only one way to transfer it to other parts of the application. In React, this means that state is passed to the view and to child components. Actions are triggered by the view. Actions can update the state, and the state change is passed to the view and to child components. The view is a result of the application state. State can only change when actions happened. When actions happened, the state is updated. So thanks for one-way building, data cannot flow in opposite way as would happen in two-way bindings, for example. And this has made some key advantages. First, it's less error prone as you have more control over your data. It's easier to debug as you know that what is coming from where. It's more efficient as the library already knows what the boundaries are of each part of the system. A state is always owned by the component. Any data that's affected by the state can only affect components below it, its children. Changing state on component will never affect its parent or its siblings or any other components in the application, just its children. It is a reason that the state is often moved up in a component tree so that it can be shared between components that need to access it. So one more time about advantages of unidirectional data flow. Debugging. It's the first advantages. This is debugging. One-way data flow makes debugging much easier. When the developer know where the data is coming from, where it is going, they can dry run and to find the problems more efficiently. More efficiently it's pronounced. So then you might better control your application. So having a data flow in one direction makes the program less prone to errors and give the developers more control. And efficiency. And the used libraries are once again just so efficiency as we use in library are very at the limitations and specifications of the unidirectional flow. Extra resources are not wasted, leading to an efficient process. That's all about unidirectional data flow. And the second data flow, this is lifting state up. Lifting state up. So I have an example actually, but okay. So lifting state up is a common pattern that is essential for React developers to know. It helps you avoid more complex patterns for imagining your state. Let's see small example. Give me a second, please. Okay, seems like, yeah, oh no, I have this. Yeah, this. So let's take a look at this picture. So here once we add in new item into our to-do list, right? Here we have to-do list, the field where we can add our new item, add button, and we have a counter with the total to-dos which we have in our application, right? So once we add a new item to our to-dos, it is immediately added to state. Then we see that to-do list, this is a to-do list, component re-rendered to display that new items as the same for this counter, let's say to-do counter, to show which is showing us a number of to-do, which is shown like 3, 4 here. So lifting state up is an important pattern, as I said, to React developers, because sometimes we have state that's located within a particular component that also need to be shared with siblings components. Instead of using an entire state management library like Redux or React Context, we can just lift the state up to the closest component and sister, and pass both the state variables, the state values down, as well as any callbacks to update the state. So if we will take a look into the code about this to-do application, we might see that we have we might submit our form using handle. Okay, I will use this better. Handle submit function. In this handle submit function, we are providing new state to our to-dos, right? And it's lifting up to other components, to to-do counter and to-do list. So that's it for data flow. And we go back to React hooks. So by the way, if you have, okay, I will take a look at the chat. If a very new topic you would introduce to us, please. I'm not sure which example are you talking about? And Guyane, could you please elaborate on this a bit more? If you're talking about the example of the code which I provide you right now, yes, I will give you the links to articles and other code which I have. Yeah, I will provide you, okay? As you see, I have a bunch of links for you, so don't worry about it. This is, I will separate it in your homework, so in our chat in Teams, so don't worry about it. Okay, let's talk about React hooks. So I will not share this presentation in full screen mode. Is it okay for you? You could see this presentation or not, because we will switch a little bit between the web browser and web store sometimes. Does it okay? Okay. Okay, so thanks. So let's start. Our agenda for today, we will try to understand what is it hooks. We talk about how we can, which hooks we might use, which is hooks exist in React, how we can use them a little bit, talk about it. We will talk about custom hooks. It means that we might use in React not only hooks which exist, but we might create our hooks too. And also we discuss the rules of hook. So which rules we should follow when we're using them. And let's go to the topic. Hooks are new in additional in React. They new in React 16.8. They let us state and other React features without writing a class. Hooks are backward compatibility. This page, we have some list of hooks which we will take a look at this presentation, and you might see all React hooks also in the official website. This is application, and in a React website on the web page reactjs.org, one additional link which you might usually take a look. You might see on the page here. Yeah, like this. Hooks overview. Yeah, you might see see here the list of hooks which are presented here. But let's get back to our presentation. And so hooks are the new features, as I mentioned before, that were presented in React 16.8 version. It allows you to use state and other React features without writing a classes. Hooks are the functions which hook into React state and lifecycle features from function component. It doesn't work inside classes. Hooks are backward compatibility, which means it doesn't contain any breaking changes. Also, it doesn't replace your knowledge of React concept. When to use a hooks? If we try to write a function component and then we want to add some state to it, previously we do this by converting it to class. But now we might do it by using hooks inside of existing function component. So let's take a look here. Okay, so one more additional to hooks. How can I say, in other words, right? So hooks, this is a features. Once again, which is React provide us if we want to make functional component. We create the features are alternatives to few lifecycle methods like a component did mount or component did update. Apart from this, it gives us more flexibility to write some maintainable code instead of using classes, and we are just adding our hooks to the component. So let's take a look. Use state hook. Use state returns the state value and functions to update it. During the initial render, the return state is the same as the value passed as the first argument initial state here. The state function is used to update the same, the set state function, sorry. The set state function is used to update the state. It concepts a new state value and requires a render of the component. During subsequent re-renders, the first value re-render by use state, using always to be most recent state after applying updates. So let's take a look to the example. Here we have so we have our application, and inside the application we have a component which is called setState. And setState component returns us an input where we might enter some value and showing us our value which we are added to this component. Let's take a look at the example, how it works. Just render it once again and see. Let's start to texting hello words. Hello world. So this is how the demonstration. So back again, we have in here in input unchanged function, which is provide us some new value which we put in our input, and set state, set new state to the component. Here is a state. This is function which is called set state, right? In our presentation, like set state. Usually this function starting from the set word, and here the value, we provide default value, which is better here. So so I'm not sure, do you have any questions or not? If yes, Alexei and Yuri, please pay attention on this, and maybe you will unmute yourself and provide some comments, okay? So what I would like to add about this use state hook, if the new state is computed using the previous state, you can pass a function to set state, right? So the function will receive the previous value, and you know, like in our example, the function will receive the previous value. Maybe it's bad. Yeah, it's bad example, but okay. So if we are using the function, we receive the previous value and return the updated value, right? That's how it works here. The function, when we type in here some additional symbols, we receiving in our functions for use state, we have a previous value, we have a new state, and because of this, we might update our current state, right? Updating our value. If you update function returns if the updated function returns the same value as the current state, the subsequent re-render will be skipped completely. So, and one more additional note about it. For example, unlike the setState method found in class component, useState doesn't automatically merge updated objects. You can replicate this behavior by combining the function updater from the object spread syntaxes. So what does it mean? It means that you might reuse some state, like use state here, like this, and previous state using error functions, and here we return spread syntax operator, which will be previous state, comma, updated state. In our case, sorry, not state, it's value. So some kind of this. It's not appropriate to this code, it's just the example how we can combine the function from the object for our use state. Okay, so let's back and let's talk about lazy initial state. The initial state argument is a state used during the initial render. In subsequent renders, it is disregarded. In an initial state is the result of an expensive if the initial state is a result of expensive computation, you may provide a function instead, which will be executed only by the initial render. So if so, for example, like here we provide initial state argument here for the state so as I mentioned before, this is example for the explanation. This. So have you any questions about use state hooks? Okay, let's say no and going forward. Yeah, I didn't mention that, React telling us that we have 3 basic hooks, and And he separated the hooks for a few parts. This is like basic hooks and additional hooks. But as I know, to basic hooks, we might say that this is use state, use effect, and use context. But also, I don't know, but really often you might see such hooks like use memo or use use effect. Yeah, so not sure about how the React separated, but yeah, anyway, use effect, this is one of the basic hooks in React. Use effect, you know, in 90% of the time, this is what we want to use. When hooks are stable and if you refactor any of your classes component to use hooks, you likely move any code from component didn't mount or component did update, and component will unmount to use effect. The one catch in these runs after React render your component and ensures that your effect callback doesn't block browser painting. This differences from the behavior in class component where component did mount and component did update run synchronously after rendering. It's more performant this way, and most of this time this is what you want, what we want usually. However, if we if our effect is mutating the DOM via DOM, not ref, for example, and the DOM mutation will change the appearance of the DOM node between the time that it is re-render and your effect mutates it, then you don't want to use effect. In this case, we will better use, for example, we use layout effect. Otherwise, the user could see the filter when your DOM mutations take effect. This is pretty much the only time we wanted to avoid use effect and use layout effect instead. As I said, use effect accept the functions. Sorry, move back. Use effect accept the function that contains imperative, possibly effect code. Mutations, subscriptions, timers, login, and other side effects are not allowed inside the main body of the function component. Doing so will lead to confusing bugs and inconsistency in the UI. Instead, we are using use effect. The function passed to use effect will run the render is committed to the screen. Thinks of effect as an escaped hatch from React's purely functional world into the imperative world. By default, effects run after every component render, but we can choose the fire from only when certain values have changed. So often effects create resources that needs to be cleaned up before the component leaves the screen, such as subscription or timer ID. To do this, the function passed to use effect return a cleanup function, like in this example. The cleanup function runs before the component is removed from the UI to prevent memory leaks, in order to prevent memory leaks. And additionally, if a component renders multiple times, as it might typically be on your page, the application effect is cleaned up before executing the next effect. In this example, this means a new subscription is created on every update. To avoid firing an effect on every update, refer to the we should use another. So we should use timing of effects or something like this, and we avoid this situation. Then I've started to talk about use layout effect. Use layout effect. Use layout effect. This is really really similar to use effect. I think I might say this, but it fires synchronously after all DOM mutations. Use this so use this to read layout from the DOM and synchronously re-render that. Yes, so we are, if we would like to use our DOM, our changes in DOM, synchronously re-render DOM, we might use layout effect. So updates which were scheduled inside a use layout effect will be flashed synchronously before the browser has a change to Paint. And you know, as I said, it is really, really similar to use effect. I've started to explain that. So if our the comparison between use effect and use layout effect. So once again, if we affect, if our, so not like this. So if our effect is mutating the DOM, and the DOM mutation will change the appearance of a DOM node between the time that is rendered your effect rendered and our effect mutates it. So we want to use effect, and instead of this, we are using use layout effect. Use layout effect runs synchronously immediately after React has performed all DOM mutation. So it might be it may be useful if we need to make DOM measurement, like getting the scroll position or other styles for an element, and then make DOM mutations or trigger a synchronous re-render by updating state. So as far as the scheduling, this works the same way as component did mount and component did update. The code runs immediately after the DOM has been updated, but before the browser has had a chance to print those changes, the user doesn't actually see the updates until after the browser has repainted. Okay, so about use memo. So I might say that use mem returns a memorized value. So pass a create function, you know, the create, like, let's say it called create function, and an array of dependencies. Use memo will only recompute the memorized value when one of the dependencies has changed. This optimization helps to avoid effectively calculations or every render. Remember that the function passed to use memo runs during rendering. Don't do anything that you wouldn't normally do while rendering. For example, side effect belongs in use effect, not use memo. So actually, I forgot about examples for use effect. Use effect, right? We talk about it and I will show you right now. One second, please. Not like this. Use effect tutorial. So our application is running here, and when we click in, we are changing the counter. Yeah, so let's go there, see what's inside. So here we have a request. This is typically how we can get a data from some API. So we have two state for data and for the count. And we are returning the component, which is have a data, count, and button click, which we saw on our screen here, right? And so we are, why here is use state? See, so so here we have some. So should I here mention that this is a functions, right? So as I mentioned before, use effect accept a function. Here in this function, we are getting the data, and so guys, I actually need a bit help. Not sure how I should understand this example. Yura, maybe you might provide me this a little bit with appropriate words.
This use effect, right?
Yeah.
Use effect work without dependencies only one times when we refresh page, and after if we delete comma and dependencies, use effects will call all time after change data.
Yeah, so you might try to click this tutorial by yourself. I will provide you a link to the repository, okay? And one more example about use memo. Use memo tutorial. Okay, so yeah, here the toggle function, toggle effect. So here, as I mentioned here, use memo returns memorize function. Let's take a look at the code for memo tutorial. We have some effect which runs after we loaded the page. Then we having here a button which is changing our changing here the title toggle not and show it and hide it. Use memo function. So because the use memo will only recompute the memorized value when one of the dependency has changed, after we are changing our toggle state. So set toggle, we are changing it, and after it's changed, our use memo hook will work and provide here some additional information. Maybe just add something here. Unfortunately, I didn't work with use memo yet.
Yeah, use memo. It's hook when the page refreshed and data not changed. Use memo returns the same object without any changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we'll get from cache.
Okay, so I was wrong a little bit. Okay, yeah, let's get back to the presentation. Use callback. Use callback. Use memo returns memorized value. The use callback returns the memorized callback. If we are passing an inline callback and an array of dependencies, use callback will return a memorized version of callback that only changes if one of the dependencies has changed. This is useful when passing callback to optimize child component that we rely on reference equality to prevent unnecessary renders. Use callback usually have two arguments. This is function, and the first argument, this is a function, and the second, this is dependency. So one interesting things, use callbacks is usually used to optimize the rendering behavior in our React functional component, as I mentioned before, while use memo is, like for comparison, use callback with use memo. The use memo is used to memorize expensive functions to avoid having to call them on every render. As a standard construction of hooks, those two solutions are not so different, like with use effect and hook that manage the side effect in functional components. Argument callback comes first and then an array of dependencies. So, one more additional things about use effect and callback refs. So, if we want to respond to React element mounting on the DOM, you might be tempted to use useRef to get a reference. Useref, once we will talk about useref in the next slide, but so if we want to respond to React elements mounting on a DOM, we might be tempted to use useref to get reference to it and use effect to respond to its mounts and unmounts. But it won't work. This is because there is no callback or re-render when a component is unmounted and attached to ref current using useRef. The React hook for React hooks, usually in these cases, we are let's say that we can rely on passing a regular function wrapped with a use callback to ref, like in this example. And in this case, React to choose latest DOM node reference that it returns. So things which you should. So here we have a ref argument. We pass in here a measure ref function, and using callback, we are changing height for this hello world. Yeah. So what you should remember: the ref function is guaranteed to be called on mounts and unmounts of element, even on the first mount, and even if the unmounted is a result of the parent element unmounting. Then make sure to wrap ref callback with use callback. Without it, if you cause a render from the ref callback, the ref callback will be triggered again with null, potentially leading to an endless loop because of React internals. So that's it about use callback, as I remember. Yes, and we talk a bit about use ref. Use ref returns a mutable ref object whose current property is initialized to the past argument initial value. The returned object will persist from the full lifetime of the component. Let's take a look at the example. A common use case is to access a child imperatively. So here in this example, we have a component which is called text input with focus button. Here we have input element which is where we providing to use ref now. We have here a button click function on button click function, which my focusing on the input, and here we also have input button where we should point our value. So let me, unfortunately, okay, here. So essentially use ref is like a box that can hold immutable values in its current property. I try to remember, I have use ref example. Yeah, the same example almost. And let's take a look. Ref tutorial, let's run it and take a look. Right, so we are changing the name. Here, Pedro. Let's take a look what on the hood. So we have a button which is on clicked. Here is a empty value. Okay, and let's you know what to do. Use we will a little bit change this example with providing the same logic as on the slide, right? And not like this. So our on click function we changed to value to the null, and input element. Okay. Like this. Input ref current dot focus. Yeah, it should be okay right now. Let's try test. Yeah, we're still in focus, right? So the same with so like here, right? So current points to the mountain text input element. So essentially, use ref is like a box that can hold mutable values in this current property. We might be familiar with the refs primarily as a way to access the DOM. If we pass a ref object to React with ref attribute, React will set its .current property to the current DOM node whenever that node changes. However, useEffect is useful for more than the ref attribute. So it is handy to keep in any mutable value around, similar to how you had used instance fields in classes, and so like in these examples, we can write a useEffect. So here, here we have a timer component. No, we have just function which is called timer. It should be a component. In most cases, right, we have such values as time as a components. So, and for this, give me a second, please. So here, like, so because it's handy, we might keep in any mutable values around, similar to have your use to how you would use instance field in classes. In this example, this is like example with a useEffect, with a useRef. If we just wanted to set an interval, we would need to the ref. We wouldn't need the ref, but it's useful if we want to clear the interval from an event handler, like handler cancel click. We provide here a clear interval, and we are having here, so we're just clearing an interval here. Conceptually, we can think of refs as similar to instance variable in a class. Useless, we're doing lazy initialization, avoiding setting ref during rendering. This can lead to surprising behavior. Instead, typically you want to modify refs in even handler and effect. So that's it about useRef. And yeah, with useRef tutorial, you will try to change here some value. For example, we might get here a state, for example, of this input and provide new value here, right? But I recommend you to try this example by yourself. So then, use context. This is one of basic hooks in React. Use context accepting a context option. Sorry. 1, 2, 3. Accepts a context object. The value returns from React create context. And returns the current context value from the context. The current context value is terminated by the value properties of the nearest my context provider, for example, above the calling component in a tree. When the nearest my context provider above the component updates, this hook will trigger and re-render with the latest context value passed to the myContext provider. Even if an parent use React member or should component update, re-render will still happen, starting at the component itself using useContext. So please don't forget that the argument to useContext must be context object itself. So it means that use context, myContext. It's correct, but for example, if you provide such value like myContext.consumer or myContext.provider, if you provide here consumer or provider, it will be incorrect. Recommend a component calling useContext will always re-render when the context value changed. If re-rendering the component is expensive, you can optimize it by using memorization. Then let's take a look a bit to useContext example. So it called context tutorial. And just see how it works. All right, like this. Let's take a look a bit in the side of the code. So we have a login, we have a user component in a context provider, right? So providing name, changing the state value, and inside of login we have an input. Login module, we have an input using context in order to change it, the value, and inside of user we are having just div where we use context and applying context to use username, just showing the result. Right, so on change function is changing our argument changing our username, and in user component we are changing this value. Okay, so user reducer. So let me check, did I forgot something or not? No, seems like not. So use reducer. This is like alternative of useState, except of a reducer of type which is accepts a reducer of type state action useState and returns the current state paired with the dispatch method. So let's take a look at the examples. Use reducer, and in here reducer tutorial, let's start it here. So as we see that we have here a reducer, use reducer hook, which is have so once again so reducers apply 3 arguments. Reducer initial argument and init as it was in a hook, right? So then here this reducer tutorial provide us a state count button, which is when we clicking on this button, we dispatch new types and changing a state depending on which is the number here. And in a reducer, so in a reducer function, here we are depending on state, on action type which we have, we are changing the state. Maybe, so Said, hello, nice to see you here.
Hi there.
So maybe you might add to my tutorial, reducer tutorial, something additional to my word.
Well, yeah, probably I would also talk about a little bit about the action creators, what they do, and so for example, on top of it, we have the actions. So for example, the increment and the toggle show text. So those are called the actions. So we basically try to dispatch a specific action inside our UI components. And the UI component basically just reacts to specific actions accordingly. For example, so let's take the case with the increment, which is on line 5. So we have a state which is our initial state of our store. So you can consider this as like built-in local storage, I would say, if you ever worked with local storage, but it's a little bit complicated, and it may work with more advanced data structures as well. So moving back to the increment action. So as you can see, we basically just provide a type of an action. So in this case, the type is increment, and the next line inside our switch case, we just return we mutate the state that we have. And return the state that should be taken over after we dispatch that specific action element. So for example, the increment, so what it does is it just increments the count, which is inside our store. So as you can see, it is basically just returning the exact same object, except it is incrementing the count by 1. So that's just I guess one of the nuances of use reducer. So moving to the UI component. So we already have this reducer, but how we dispatch the reducer. So inside our UI component, what we do is we use the hook called use reducer, and it basically takes what kind of a reducer we want to use, and the store that I was talking about. So whatever comes next is right after reducer. As you can see, that's the initial argument, or we are just trying to set up the initial value to the store that we are working with. By store, I mean everything that. So this is the space. This is a field. This is a data structure where you can keep like the elements or even some values inside your application. So it may be. So in this case, this is just a number. but in more complex applications, it may be like a user or even some items. Or so let's say you are fetching a bunch of different movies or songs using some kind of an API. If you, for example, without this, I guess, the reducer, what you do is you basically just every single time you fetch again and again. But in this case, it is way more convenient because you can basically just fetch it once and save it inside your store. And that can be accessed after you dispatch some kind of an action. So yeah, so in this example, for example, this is not that complex. So we are basically just using the reducer. We are giving some initial state, and on line 29 we can see the count that is being displayed inside our component. And also we have a button handler. So whenever we click the specific button, for example, it may be a button or any kind of a different action, we dispatch action. In this case, the action is called increment. So that one is displayed on from 21 to 23rd line. So, but in this case, I guess we are displaying like two dispatchers, two actions, I would say. So one of them is incrementing, another one is, so another one is, I guess that one is just used to hide or show the text. So yeah, but this is this is pretty much similar to what the Redux itself does. So that's another topic, I guess, to discuss. But yeah, in most cases, in bigger applications, you basically tend to go with some kind of a library, for example, the Redux or MobX. So there is also an option. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So use imperative handle. This is our next hook. Imperative handle customize the instance value that is exposed to parent component when using ref. As always, imperative code using should be avoided in most cases. Use imperative handle should be used with forward ref usually. Use imperative handle. Here. Yeah, so Said, maybe you might explain it from even without seeing this code, because I'm just might provide this that this example might help us in a parent component. The render, let's see this, render this button ref, which would be able to call the alter toggle function. And this function is providing us some state about toggling, and we might see the result that toggle from, so if we're toggle from parent this button, we might see the result, but button from the child not changing the state, because so button from parent and this this button is from child. Seems like somewhere is an issue, right, Said, here? Or some misunderstand?
Well, really can't see any issue really. No, I really don't have an idea here. Really can't see the issue, I guess.
Okay, you ref with null, maybe because null here.
What does the example should do?
So the example seems like should see as comparison between a button which is from the parent and toggling, you know, the moment. So this example is demonstrating of use imperative handle hook.
Okay. Yeah. Well, couple of words about this hook. Yeah. We definitely have to check the example. But the main idea with the use imperative handle hook is what we have to understand is that usually the data is like unidirectional in React, but sometimes you really want to reach like from your child component to your parent component. So for example, when you want to like pass the data up to like to the upper level inside your component hierarchy. Then in that case, this is one of the hooks that may be maybe handy for your use case. But this is pretty rarely used hook. So I for example never used in my experience really. So, but yeah, this basically just makes makes the flow of your data bidirectional. So you can, for example, pass your data down to your child component and from your child component back to your parent component. So that's the whole idea here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Said.
No problem.
And so use the debug value, the next hook. So use debug value can be used to display a label for custom hooks in React Dev Tool. For example, so here we provide some value to this hook. Not to this hook, sorry. We providing some value to our, let's say, in order, if we would like to show, for example, in a label some value, we might show a label in DevTools next to this hook. So here, like, maybe how to say that. So here in the second example, use debug value, a custom hook that render a date value could avoid calling the toDateString function unnecessarily by passing the following format, right? And for the function, for the reason, not like this. So as I understand, this hook is using for debug some value, providing a console value which you might. So you just use this hook in order to debug your values in a console, or not in console, in dev2 actually. Maybe Said, maybe you faced with this hook, because unfortunately I don't have experience in most of them.
Right. Well, this is, I would say, a little bit of an advanced hook to use, but this is mostly used to whenever you want to like track down what your application is doing, for example. So let's say your application is handling some kind of fetch request. So you're reaching out to an API and you are getting a list of, so let's take our movies, right? And inside your fetch request, what you can do is you can just console log and etc. But this is like the console log is yeah, well that's I would say one of the first tools that you can reach out to debug your application. But using the use debug hook, you can basically like build the path or let's say the way your application is handling like specific action, for example. Let's take the same old fetch request. So for example, in a fetch request, you can, for example, tell, okay, so I am like fetching like specific value. You can tell, okay, so inside the value, you can say, okay, so I'm fetching this API, and you can put for example, the URL that you're reaching out to. Then you can just build the hierarchy from exact same point. For example, you can pass down some specific values, like what kind of status did you get on what point, or did your fetch failed, or did it succeeded, or maybe even did it loaded some kind of a movies, or it didn't. But this is, as I said, this is pretty much rarely used hook, and this is a little bit of an advanced topic, really. This is definitely good to know, but for the time being, I guess you can definitely use some kind of a IDE to debug your application. But yeah, you can definitely play around with. And what you really have to understand and know here is that this can be used, for example, just to track down or maybe even like build a path of your application, the action that your application is handling at this point. So that's it.
So as I understand, this is example of this hook,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you can.
How you will see the state in your console log. So something like
Yeah, this is the same. Yeah. So you can. So as you can see, we are doing a fetch request here, and on top you get like a bunch of bunch of results for your fetch request. But what we normally do is we really don't care about what kind of response or result we get. But what we want to do is we want to like take a snapshot of every single action or even every single step that your application is taking while it's fetching some kind of data. Like as I said, what kind of status code did it get? Did it succeeded, or did it run into some kind of an error, or what was the length of your response, and etc.
Yeah, something like
yeah. So yeah, as you can see, yeah. So here, for example, we have different different use cases. For example, so on top, it is checking the status code. So we are logging the status code. Then we are checking what kind of error did we get. Did it succeeded or not? And then moving on to the right bottom, where we already did fetch some data, we can basically just tell, okay, so we got like this this number of MP3 files or MP3 like songs or whatever. Yeah, so this is the stuff that I'm talking about. So the debug value, as you can see, so the first one is the API URL. The second one is some kind of a random, I guess, comment. The third one is basically just saying that, okay, the status code that we got is 404, thus we fetched thus our fetch is failed, and no MP3s we got. So this is more or less used, like this is used in depth in backend development as well. So from my experience, I can say that this kind of a debug comments is pretty much like in every single action that you take inside your application. So yeah, this is a pretty handy stuff, especially when you want to track down what kind of error did your application run into.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. And let's talk about React Memo. So React Memo is a high-order component. If your component renders the same result, given the same properties, you can wrap it in a call to React Memo. For a performance boost in some cases by memorizing the result, this means that React will skip rendering the component and reuse the last rendered result. React Memo only checks from property changes. If your function component if your function component wrapped in React Memo has a use state or use reducer or use context hook, in its implementation, it will still render it when state or context change. So by default, it will only show. By default, it will be only surely compare complex object in a properties object. If you want to control over the comparison, you can also provide a custom comparison function as the second argument. So that's it about React hooks, which is React provides us in order to use them. Let's talk a little bit about custom hooks. It's really interesting, but unfortunately I will not show you any examples, but I may provide you links if you're interested how in a guide how you can create your own React hooks, or also you might talk about it in one-to-one session with your mentors. Okay. There are only about about the hooks. So as I said, they were the hooks will be introduced not so long time ago with their first release of the hooks. Hooks have given function components that ability to use state and use side effect with built-in hooks such as React use state hooks and React use effect hooks. There are only a handful built-in hooks. For example, use reducer, use callback, use memo, use context, which provide the React salt. However, by using these hooks as a foundation, React developers can create their own hooks called custom hooks. Before you start to create your own hooks, you need to know that there are two rules to which help you to create your own hooks. They are as custom hooks are named with use as prefix. For example, a custom hooks would be name use local storage or use authentication in so it means that in cases where you will be if you will be developing your custom hooks, the name of hooks should be started with use, and this is like a rule. It's better to such a rule help you and your colleagues understand that this is a hook, and this hook will be created by you with all rules, right? And the custom hook consists of built-in React hooks or other custom hooks. Therefore, a custom hook is always a new composition of one or multiple hooks. If a custom hook doesn't use any hooks, internally it's not a custom hook and shouldn't have the prefix use. Yeah, so some kind of these rules, and I will provide you a link after this meeting. I found really interesting solutions or guidelines where you can check by yourself how to create hooks, okay? And about rules of hooks, this topic. So, yeah, hooks are JavaScript function, right? But we need to follow some rules. Actually, this is the 2 rules when using them. Usually, you might notice that you might use linter plugins, for example, and in these linter plugins, these rules are usually included. So the rules is the next. Hooks should be called only from function component or custom hooks. And it means that so don't call hooks from the regular JavaScript function. Instead, you can call hooks as it mentioned from the custom call hook from the React functional component or from custom hook. And the next rule, this is we should only call hooks at the top level. Don't call hook inside loop, conditions, or nested functions. Instead, always use hooks at the top level of React function before any earlier returns. By following this rule, you ensure that hooks are called in the same order each time a component renders. That's what allows React to correctly preserve the state of hooks between multiple use state and use effect calls. So these all rules, and actually that's it for today. I didn't show you the whole hooks from this repository, but I will provide you a link to the repository, and you could try these hooks by yourself and might ask some questions in your with your mentors in the private sessions.
Maybe I could show some examples for the custom hook. Just a moment.
Yeah, please.
Just a moment. All right. So yeah, as you can see, this is pretty like old code. So back in 2020, when I used to like writing in React, so this is these are like one of my custom hooks. So as you can see, yeah, so the naming is kind of a rule that you have to follow. So it begins with use and whatever name you want to give it. So let's take an example. The simplest one is use mounted. So this is just to determine whether your component did mount or didn't. So as you can see, this is pretty like straightforward one. So we have mounted and set mounted. We are using use state, as you can see, and using the use effect. So here on line 6, the use effect is being used just to determine did our component mount or it didn't. So the key point here in this logic is the empty array brackets. So what it does is it is used to control the flow of your component. So this is called the dependency of your use effect. So I didn't I wasn't in the beginning of this call, so I'm not sure whether it was covered or not. So in case if not, so this is called the dependency array. So in case if it's empty, whatever is inside your use effect is called only when the component mounts. So this code is this code is run only once. So that's the point here. So whenever it run, I'm just setting the set mounted to true, which is used inside my different components, just to determine whether the component did mount or it didn't. So this is the most straightforward one. So another one is use form fields. So this was, as I said, so this was back in 2020 when I didn't work with Formic or some other libraries with React. So I tried to like find my own solution to handle all these form input fields. So yeah, the flow is pretty much the same. As you can see, we have the states here that can be processed, like can be passed down to your custom hook. For example, you can say state, and whatever goes inside your state will be considered as your default state for your form fields. For example, let's say you have form with username and password. And inside your state, you can pass, for example, just an object with username and password. So that would do the job. So this is classic, just handle change whatever is inside your form and whatever is inside your field. But the main point is right here on line 8. As I already told you, we can pass like any object. Yeah, especially when we have like giant forms, we have to pass like only an object just to kind of to make it easier to handle our form. So just in order to not to like override our object, we are using so I'm using the spread operator. So as you can see, I have this previous value, which is basically taken from here. So I'm copying all these previous values. So let's take as an example, I want to change only the username, but I also have like email address or password, right? But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm copying username and password, and I'm only changing the field, changing only the field that I want to change. Like, for example, so here in previous, we have username, password, and some other field that I named before. And then inside the key, I'm basically just saying, okay, so I want to change the key that was passed here. So the key basically determines the name of our field. So in this case, it might be username or password or whatever other field name may be, and just say preventing the value itself. And then we're just returning fields and handle change, which can be used as so let me show you as an example, I guess. So let's say we have this use form fields. So use form fields. and inside we have username. So this might be anything, and the password, let's say. And as you can see, it returns an object that we can process something like this. So this is called fields and handle change. So yeah, this is pretty much it, right? So inside fields, then we can use, for example, fields.username, or even like fields.password, or any other field that you passed inside your form field. So yeah, this is just a straightforward example, I would say. But this one, this is a little bit tricky and a little bit advanced one. So I basically just used this one to handle the theme changing. So from dark mode to light mode and back to light mode, and back to dark mode. Yeah, so it also uses some custom stuff. So I wouldn't really stop here. But the idea is the same. As you can see, we have all right. So we don't have state here, but we have the use SWR. I guess this is a server. I can't remember what that one is used for, but this is yet again another custom hook that I'm using inside my custom hook. So yeah, so this is a little bit advanced, and this is 2 years old. So yeah, that's it from my side. I just wanted to share like some a little bit